Bernie Sanders released another awesome bill targeting giant financial institutions. So here's what CNBC says. Senator Sanders wants to break up J.P. Morgan, Berkshire Hathaway, and other large financials. Senator Bernie Sanders introduced a bill on Wednesday that would require the breakup of any financial company that has a total exposure of greater than 3% of gross domestic product. Based on that threshold, which is $584 billion, 6 banks and 4 non-banks would have to split up. The banks are JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley. The non-banks are Berkshire Hathaway, as well as Prudential Financial, MetLife, and American International Group. So here's something that's interesting. Had this bill, which by the way is called the Too Big to Fail, Too Big to Exist bill, had it been law back in 2007, it would have forced Lehman Brothers to split up, because it had assets more than 4.4% of GDP, and Bear Stearns, with assets at 2.8% of GDP, it would have forced them to restructure. So the funny thing is, here's the first thought I had when I read through this. This should get right-wing support because you get people like Steve Bannon, who calls himself an economic nationalist. Okay, well, if you're an economic nationalist, that is literally what this bill from Bernie Sanders does. It protects the nation, it protects the taxpayers of this country from having to pay for the fail sons and coke addicts on Wall Street who have previously crashed their companies, bankrupted their companies, and tanked the world economy in the process. So think about it. What they're saying here is, and what Bernie's bill does here is, it basically maintains the integrity of competition in a capitalist system. So what's the actual, so-called far left position on this? Nationalize the banks. Nationalize them. Well, if you don't do that, what's the second best option? What Bernie Sanders proposed here, which is break them up. You can keep them privately owned, but you break them up. And when you do that, it's a way to, you keep the system, the fundamentals of the system as it is, so you have private ownership. But at the same time that you do that, you're protecting the integrity of the entire economy, because what happens is, when they get this big, then the argument is they can't fail, because if they do fail, they tank the entire economy with it, and we can't risk tanking the entire economy, so they get bailed out. So, in other words, you've set up a system. Think about it. Think about the way it works. Think about the incentive structure of what I just described. So now, if you're in Goldman Sachs, you're in Wells Fargo, you're in Morgan Stanley, you're in Bank of America, what incentive do you have to do your job properly? Because hey, no matter what, I'm going to get bailed out. If I fuck up, I get bailed out. If I don't fuck up, I'm rich anyway. So what incentive do I have to do the right thing? The answer is they have no incentive to do the right thing. None at all. No incentive at all to do the right thing. So what that does is it sets up a situation where, like in the case of Goldman Sachs, just keep doing fraud. You got to remember, guys, fraud was their business model. That's not conjecture. It's not an opinion. That's a fact. What they did is they packaged together all the subprime mortgages, had them rated AAA, which, by the way, was a lie because they bought the ratings agencies. That's already fraud. So then they sell them to unsuspecting clients and tell the clients they're going to make a lot of money. Then, as they're selling them to unsuspecting clients, they turn around and bet on those same packages they just sold to fail. You can't do that. That's fraud. That's what that is. You know it's a shitty product, but you're selling it pretending it's good. You're committing fraud. Fraud was their business model. Well, now, since they know, hey, we're too big to fail and we're not being broken up, we're going to get bailed out again if something happens, why would they stop doing fraud? And by the way, none of them went to jail when they did fraud anyway. So they're not going to go to jail. They're not going to go bankrupt. They can keep doing what they're doing and get away with it. Why would they stop committing fraud? I'm telling you, this bill is honestly a no-brainer. And, people should be thanking their lucky stars. The establishment should be thanking its lucky stars that Bernie Sanders is not calling for full nationalization. Because my guess is if somebody like Jeremy Corbyn were here, he'd be like, yeah, no, nationalize him. Don't break him up. Nationalize him. So, but yet again, you have Bernie proposing like very just reasonable reform, but he's painted as the far leftist, like he's the crazy one. No, the crazy thing is the system that we have right now. That's the thing that's absolutely nuts, that makes absolutely no sense, that's laughably stupid. And again, this is like an episode of The Twilight Zone where Bernie is the last sane guy in Washington, D.C., and he's treated like it's the opposite.